Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I give you Zuby.
While I can neither confirm nor deny about controlling computers with your mind or going to space, all right, let's set the expectation. Uh, so this is about disability sparking innovation, and in today's world where technology is so fast-paced, AI is going in one direction, your blockchains and crypto are going in another direction, and you have your nanotechs and even biotech. Everything is just spinning in different directions. There are two words that are often thrown around. One is invention, and one is innovation. And when it comes to the description, if I memorize it correctly, it says that necessity is the mother of invention. I didn't make that up. And when it comes to innovation, it says that innovation is the father of necessity. So they have these sort of interesting relationship connecting both of them. Everywhere you look, Silicon Valley, Boston biotech, names are thrown around of the innovators. But several years ago, I noticed a gap. And I started asking myself the question, where are the tech innovators who have a disability? Good question. Do they exist? So that's how I threw myself into something I call future of disability. Now, I am not a journalist. I am not a paid researcher. This was just out of curiosity. And this started about 8, 9 years ago, where a number of things came into the market. The first one was a book by a gentleman known as Walter Isaacson. I believe he was a former exec at CNN. So he's a journalist, he's a writer. He's written books like Ben Franklin, Steve Jobs, but then he wrote this book called The Innovators. The characters featured in it include Ada Lovelace, who is credited for being the first programmer. Alan Turing, if you're doing AI, he's credited for pioneering AI. And household names like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, the Google founders, right? If you take away Microsoft, Apple, and Google, where will our digital our life be today, right? But, again, I noticed the gap. Where are the innovators who have a disability? So as that book was coming online, something else interesting happened. And this is in the space of patient innovation. So patient innovation is a title given to someone who is a patient. So someone who has a chronic illness, but that person is leveraging technology and innovation to solve their own problem. Quite frankly, I think that's a superhero. If I had the power, I'd give them a cape, right? They're already battling with a challenge, and we all know our very beautiful healthcare system, right? But they've taken it upon themselves to solve that problem, to benefit themselves, and perhaps hundreds of thousands, or perhaps even millions of people around the world. So I learned about Dana Lewis. Now, Dana has type 1 diabetes, but she was very focused on doing something about it. So she put together a team of other folks with diabetes, not the medical professionals, not medical devices, no, just other folks with diabetes. And she's a data scientist. She also added some software engineers. And together, they did something the medical community has never been able to do. They created the world's first artificial pancreas, a DIY artificial pancreas. Focuses on automating insulin pumps. So she went from that to becoming a very strong advocate for diabetes and published books and even a children's book. So let's take a step back. We've identified some innovators, the innovators. We've identified patient innovator, Dana, and many others. But again, that critical question, where are the innovators who have a disability? So this is a gap that I noticed. And I said, well, let me look around and see if I can find something. And that led me to publishing a microblog called Future of Disability, because I personally believe that the future of disability lies in innovation. So this started about 8 years ago. So over the next several minutes, I'm going to share stories about some of my favorite innovators who have a disability. And as I created the blog, I actually encountered a challenge. One is, how do you distinguish between a person with a disability that's using tech and innovation to solve their own disability problem versus a person with a disability that's simply using technology and innovation to contribute to society at large? So that led me to coin the phrase, a disabled user innovator, to describe the initial person. So anyone with a disability using tech innovation to solve their own problem, I describe that person as a disabled user innovator, and anybody else will be a disabled innovator. So over the next several minutes, I'll share with you stories of people like Vint Cerf or Vinton Cerf, Dr. Chieko Asakawa, Larry Buck. I'll touch on Think and Zoom, what it is and how it led me to join a group, crazy group called Astro Access. I'll also give mentions to companies like Microsoft and what they're doing at Ability Hacks. I think it's phenomenal. And I'll also give mentions to names like Diego Marisco, Varun Shabok, and Caroline Casey, because I think the work that they're doing is wonderful. So let's get started. Who is Vint Cerf? And just by show of hand, how many people actually know Vint Cerf? Well, know of him. Well, look around the room, please. And for somebody who can see, please describe how many hands are up versus how many hands are down to somebody who else is perhaps challenged. Who can give us, what's the percentage? What, 10%, 5% of the room? 2% of the room, okay. So let's start. Who is Vint Cerf? About a year and a half ago, he was on a podcast, a Remarkable Tech podcast. And he said something that really, really resonated with me and stuck in my brain. He said at some point in his early career, he told his teammates, hey guys, I'm not stupid, I'm just deaf. So what was he working on? Well, Vint is deaf and hard of hearing and uses hearing aids. And he was working in, at that time, about 50 years ago, when you talk about cutting bleeding edge technology, that's what he was working on at DARPA. Vint and his co-inventor invented the foundation of the internet. And folks, what I mean by foundation, I mean, if you look at this building, this room, if there's no foundation, we're not in a room. So if you yank out Vint's work, there is no internet, zero chance. So he's the co-inventor of TCP/IP protocol. Now, what could have gone through his mind? What could have perhaps inspired or led him, or what could have been transpiring in his life at this time when he was doing this work? Now, mind you, this is about 40, 50 years ago. He's using hearing aids. So perhaps picking up the landline and talking into the phone and the hearing through the receiver could have been a challenge for him, right? The landline allows you to be able to carry sound and audio over the wire. Is it possible that he said, well, what if we found a way to transmit text characters over the wire? And that's the very first version of the internet. The first version was graphical, I'm sorry, had no graphical user interface. It was mainly text characters, right? You had this dark screen. A lot of the times it was black, and the text font characters were light green. And that's all you had. There was no GUI, no pictures, no images, right? And so Vint is actually given the title as a father of the internet. He has won every award you can imagine. Presidential Medal of Freedom, National Medal of Technology, so on and so on and so on, right? But only 2% of the room know of him. And a lot of people don't even know that he is deaf and hard of hearing. Now, on one hand, a lot of great technological achievements, but this is America. We love dollars. And I'm going to throw out a question. Who can give me the economic value in terms of dollars of the internet? I'll wait. 70 trillion, 100, 200 trillion can be calculated, right? So this is an amazing work, a great contribution to society by someone who is a disabled person, but yet society at large barely mentions his name. And then that even leads me to ask the question, is the internet a curb effect? Somebody said, yeah. So what is the curb effect? Curb effect is if you put a sidewalk on the street, then someone in a wheelchair can use the sidewalk. Someone that uses a white cane can use the sidewalk, but also someone pushing a baby stroller or someone pushing a trolley can use the sidewalk. So it becomes a curb effect, something intended to solve a disability problem, but then can also serve the mainstream, right? So that's VintServe. Now let's move on to Dr. Chieko Asakawa. Dr. Chieko Asakawa is just a brilliant, brilliant computer scientist. She went blind about the age of 11 or 12, but that didn't stop her from becoming an IBM researcher, a programmer, and even earning a PhD in computer engineering. Now, take what I've just said and contrast that with the fact that 90% of blind people around the world cannot read or write. So that tells you the caliber of Dr. Chieko Asakawa. And she has won so many different awards. But what is she best known for? Ah, that's right. She created the world's first internet-based screen reader called Homepage Reader. Imagine that. Yeah, clap for her, right? And she has contributed tremendously in other ways to society through technology and innovation. But apart from the technology innovations, she also did something just incredibly remarkable. About 2009, she became an IBM fellow. Now, when you hear the word IBM fellow, you might not understand the impact. So let me paint a picture. So you have an individual who is blind, went on to get a PhD in engineering, created amazing technologies in engineering, and rose all the way to the highest technical rank you can have in IBM, which at that time there were about 60 fellows to a total number of 400,000 employees across the country, across the company, globally. 60 fellows, 400,000 employees, and she's one of those fellows. And to be a fellow, to qualify to earn that title, it means that your work has earned that company tens of billions of dollars. That's the impact of your work. And so I put Chieko as an amazing technology innovator who happens to have a disability. And next, let's talk about Larry Buck. Now, Larry is really very interesting. Larry started out life with the desire to be a medical doctor. And he actually started pursuing medicine. But then he became legally blind from something called Stargardt's disease. I also have Stargardt, so I understand that. And that stopped him from continuing in medicine. And of all things, he veered his mind into venture capital. What I mean by he veered his mind, he threw all of himself into venture capital. Larry, over his career, where he was a partner at Lux Capital, was responsible for co-founding or financing 50 startups to the tune of, can anybody guess the market capitalization? $70 billion. $70 billion in market cap over all of his companies. That will make Larry one of the top investors in Silicon Valley. And he had a disability. He was legally blind through all of this. And not only did he do that, he also founded nonprofits like USA Science and Engineering. And in 2016, that festival attracted 350,000 attendees to one festival. And something else a lot of people might not know about Larry, but you probably know this product. Larry is the co-founder of IRA, the very popular solution that is used by a lot of people who are visually impaired or blind. So personally for me, I think Larry is somebody we should know about, somebody we should talk about for his amazing achievement and contributions to technology and innovation, despite being visually impaired and legally blind and disabled himself. And now I'll go on to Think and Zoom. What is Think and Zoom? Well, just like Larry, who wanted to pursue medicine, I wanted to pursue medicine, and so I actually started pre-med, and I was in the military when Stargardt came calling, and I became legally blind. The military doesn't like disabled people, so they kicked me out. And the medical community doesn't embrace disabled people, so I couldn't continue. So I lost two things I wanted to pursue at a very young age. And of all things, I chose to pursue computer engineering instead. And it was with a lot of hardship. And after about 15 years of doing that, I left. I left because I was not satisfied with the level of assistive tech that was available. And for me, it boiled down to something so simple. Seeing is one of the activities that we do with so little effort, or consuming content through our eyes. But for me, if I'm using the screen reader, I have to memorize all of these keystrokes. Oh my gosh. And if I'm using a magnifier, I have to manually operate it. So I came up with a way to actually control a magnifier and a screen reader by simply thinking, by using the brain-computer interface technology. And that's where the name Think and Zoom comes from. Now, this is nothing new. All of this happened about 10 years ago. And when I debuted the prototype, I get all kinds of feedback from, oh my gosh, this is amazing, to, oh no, this is rigged, this doesn't work, this is hocus pocus. So one of the harsh lessons I learned is sometimes when it comes to the market, you can't be too early. Because 2 years ago at CES, brain-computer interface now became technology of the year. Now the world understands brain-computer interface, but in 2015, when I was running around and trying to get support and funding to bring Think and Zoom to the market, nobody understood what I was talking about. But all was not lost, because Think and Zoom took me to many countries to go and speak, gave me opportunities to mentor a lot of, and actually was the gateway for me to join this group called Astro Access. So what is Astro Access? Imagine a world where folks who are disabled can go to outer space. Can you imagine that? Is it hard to imagine? Is it possible? Well, that's what Astro Access actually set out to do. It's a nonprofit that is providing zero gravity astronaut training to folks who are disabled. Imagine that. We believe that if we can make outer space accessible, we can make every inch of Earth space accessible. But here's the problem we ran into. It's never been done before. So for our very first zero gravity parabola flight, we actually had to partner with MIT to come up with the innovations that we're going to use on this flight. And what is a zero gravity parabola flight? Well, you get under this Boeing plane, huge plane called vomit comet, because it will make you so nauseated you'd be hurling, right? And the plane is going from 3,000 feet to 30,000 feet and doing this up and down parabolas. And it does that for about roughly 30 minutes. And as it's doing that, it's actually giving you a zero gravity environment. So you're floating. So in my cohort, we had a team of people who were wheelchair users. We had a team that were deaf and hard of hearing. I belonged to the low vision team, and there was a team who are blind, and some team members use prosthetics. And the experience is simply mind-blowing, because one of my team members had never walked before. But in this environment, he could walk. The team that's blind, that everybody was worried, can we tell where up is from where down is when the parabolas are going? Well, we found our way back to our starting station on the mat. The team that's hard of hearing, we wanted to find out, can you sign when you're in zero gravity? Well, they were able to do it upside down. So we learned a lot from that experience. And one of the biggest lessons is, all of the constraints and restrictions and things we think are impossible, if we're able to just expand our mind and apply tech and innovation, can all be conquered and achieved. Our work was featured in many publications around the world, from New York Times to BBC. We spoke at a live session of the UN, and even the Emperor of Japan congratulated us. That really was shocking to me. Our research is now published on Science Direct. And if you read it, you'll be pleasantly surprised to know that when you're in zero gravity, you can look, think, and zoom. You can use brain-computer interface to control your assistive tech. So I don't know where Dave got his information from, but they did a good job. So with all of these names, right, and the work of Astro Access, I started gathering these stories and publishing them and feeling really, very inspired and connecting with folks. Because, till today, if you think about disability or talk to somebody about disability, in their mind, they're thinking charity, volunteer, not for profit, who needs help, right? But society hardly ever thinks about the disability community as the solution providers, as the innovators and inventors, as those that can impact society and leave a mark and make society better. So these are some of the things that I really took away from the stories. Next, let's talk about a corporation like Microsoft. So, of course, it was started by Bill Gates, Paul Allen, and their mantra back when they started the company was computing for the enterprise. And the company grew. It grew up until a market valuation of about $500 billion. Till Satya Nadella took over. And he made some very interesting and impactful changes. One of the changes he made was to change their mission to computing for everyone. And as life will have it, his son at that time had a disability. So that pushed him to be the executive sponsor of what is called Microsoft Ability Hacks. And this started as a simple company-wide hackathon where they'll spend 1 week out of every year, and each employee is encouraged to come up with solutions that can benefit folks who are disabled. But as time went on, something very interesting happened. Employees started coming up with solutions outside of disability and started making the company a whole ton of money. And at last count, the valuation of Microsoft is somewhere around 2-3 trillion, too many zeros, I lost count. But it was that critical change where they now focused on everyone. They now became more inclusive. They now really moved the needle on having the employees think about accessibility and focus on creating solutions for folks with a disability. And that really tremendously boosted the company's growth. Let me switch over to other notable names that I find their work very interesting. Someone like Diego Mariscal, who is located in Washington, D.C. Now, Diego is a wheelchair user and he has cerebral palsy. But he's very focused on giving founders who are disabled the opportunity to live out their dream. And he has created 2GI, a startup accelerator that focuses on founders with a disability. And it's been running for about 10 years now. And if you look across the country, with everything we're hearing from Silicon Valley, DoorDash, Uber, Airbnb, everything we're hearing, you will hardly find a space that's conducive for a person with a disability who wants to be a founder. And Diego has been churning out great founders. One of those founders is Eric Ingram. He's a rocket engineer and a wheelchair user. He started a company called Scout. Scout builds drones that inspect satellites in space. When your satellite is in space and it veers off its orbit, that's $400 million down the drain, easy. But Eric's company has a drone up there ensuring that these valuable assets in outer space don't go into waste. So that's the outcome of Diego's work. And up there in Canada, Varun Shabuk has started Access to Success, a similar organization like 2GI, and is the only, let me repeat, it's the first and the only organization dedicated to founders with a disability across the whole of Canada. And again, all of these individuals, to me, are amazing innovators who have a disability and focus on solving disability problems with their talent. And last but not least, let's talk about Caroline Casey. Now, Carolyn is really interesting. Early in her career, she was a marketing executive, and she's legally blind. But she wanted to make a very big dent in the disability space. And she studied the space. And most of the times, when an organization is created tailored to disability, it's more of a grassroots, bottom-up organization. So she went in a different direction. She went top-down. Her focus was the corporate boardroom. She partnered with Paul Pullman, who was the chairman of Unilever, a multi-billion-dollar company, and Richard Branson of Virgin, a billionaire. And together they launched what is called the Valuable 500. Why is it called Valuable 500? Because she pitched to 5,000 companies, and 500 agreed to come together to focus on disability as a boardroom leadership agenda. And some of the impact of her work include AT&T, which was able to accept the very first person with a disability on their board, as well as Netflix UK, not America yet, but we're hopeful. But Netflix UK now accepts scripts from individuals with a disability, and many, many other accomplishments. Now, being a marketing executive, she leveraged her skills in marketing as well as technology to be able to boost her reach. Launched at One Young World, and she even came here to South by Southwest. And so if you go to Valuable 500, you see them plastered all over the place. Again, that's an amazing innovator, identified a problem, identified a need in the disability space, and embarked on solving it. So I wanted to bring all of these stories to your attention and throw out, certain questions. Whenever you go out there to make the case for disability, it's always tough. It's always very, very challenging. But I wonder, if you were to tell them that folks with a disability co-invented the internet, will that make a difference? If you were to tell them that folks with a disability became an IBM fellow, bringing in tens of billions of dollars of revenue to their corporation, will that make a difference? How do we change this narrative? How can we leverage the assets that we have in telling our stories in order to be able to achieve our goal? Personally, I think we can. I think if we discover more of these innovators and share their stories, I think that can help start changing the narrative and make the work easier. I think that can start painting folks who are disabled in a better light as solution providers, as those you can go to get the solution, to get innovations into the market, to get products into the market. Those who can benefit society, and not just those who are running a nonprofit and looking for a check or looking to be helped. I think it can help when we're talking to whether it's the government side or the corporate side in crafting and changing policy to create better environments for accommodation. And if that is achieved, then what's next? It's to make the case for accessibility and assistive tech. And that's where you come in. That's where all of you come in. All of you are accessibility professionals. So this is a way that you can leverage their stories to tell the powers that be of the importance of your work. There's no way Vince could have been able to do what he did without his hearing aid. It's impossible. There's no way Chieko will have been able to do what she did without blind assistive tech, or even Larry, and all the other innovators that I mentioned. So that's the importance, that's the power, that's the need for accessibility professionals. So I think we can leverage these stories as very important assets when we're trying to make the case for improved disability accommodations, policies, etc. And one last thing. Ready? Okay. So Dave had mentioned something about controlling computers and stuff with the brain. Let's see if it really works. Okay, you can focus on this. So what I'm about to do is play a very simple game. I'll try or I'll attempt to lift a bird out of a cage by simply thinking. Now, why is this important? Because birds love to fly, and it's not fair to have a bird locked up in a cage. But wait, there's more.
VoiceOver on. App switcher. Actions available. VoiceOver off.
So enough games. Let's do some real work. Let's know if we're going to be able to look, think, and zoom in to see better. So ladies and gentlemen, that's how to look, think, and zoom in to see better. Thanks so much. So folks, thanks so much for your time. Happy to take any questions you may have. But I believe that disability is a spark for innovation. I believe that innovation, of course, fuels our economy, but I also believe that disabled folks are part of this innovation conversation, and we should all leverage our assets in making a better case for disability. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Zuby. Really appreciate that. And he did exactly what I promised. He controlled the computer with his mind. And how many of you thought I was crazy? Okay, all right. He almost made it to space. All right, Megan Myers. Is Megan here? Megan, you've been texting on your phone. You've been sending messages about Access U and how great it is on LinkedIn and wanting people to come join us, right? I'm imagining your phone battery is almost dead. Come up here and collect your free phone battery charger. Thank you so much. Seems like I might have another one of these here. Paul Adam, are you here? There he is, right in the front row. Paul has been slacking, although now I see it on his computer. But just in case you need a phone battery charger, here you go.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for talking about Access U online. Now, I hope that you are also talking about Access U online. Blue Sky, whatever it might be, that X thing, anyway. Who's watching that? But please text, talk about Access U to everyone that you know, because I have a vision of the future that you all are going to be back here next year, right? Also, please watch Slack. We've got exciting announcements like this afternoon, Google is going to be presenting streaming their talk on what Google is doing for accessibility. So anyway, want to thank you all for being here. Again, I can't say it enough. Thank you, and go on to your next session. So thanks for being here, and we'll see y'all later.